Hey, everybody. Good morning. It is, or good afternoon if you're on the East Coast. It's Elizabeth Cronus McLaughlin. It's the 20th of August, 2019. We're here, as always, for Resistance Live. Thank you all for being here. Quick reminder, for those of you who are interested in Haven, which is our upcoming 28-day respite and relief program for activists and leaders, reminder that the scholarship application period closes tomorrow at 7 p.m. Pacific. So please get your applications in already if you haven't done that. If you would like to donate scholarships, you may also do that. You can learn all about the program by going to GaiaLeadershipProject.com/Haven. We have 40 people registered for the program, I think, as of this morning, which is incredible. And a whole slew of donated scholarships, which is even better. So many thanks to all of you. And again, if you want to go check that out, please go to GaiaLeadershipProject.com/Haven. All right, we have a few things this morning to discuss. So there was some late breaking news yesterday about Jeffrey Epstein. And I know that I've been saying for the last couple of weeks that my view on this is that whatever happened around Jeffrey Epstein's death, we're going to learn eventually. We did get the news of his autopsy last week. There was one thing that broke yesterday, though, which is weird and disturbing and damaging, honestly, to his victims. So here's what I want to say about this. So we learned yesterday that 2 days before he died, which at the moment we consider to be a suicide based on the New York City medical examiner's report. 2 days before he died, he signed a new will, and he put all of his assets, all 570 million of them, into a trust. Now, one of the reasons why this is potentially damaging is that there are certain rules about the way in which trusts can be tapped for liability purposes against an estate that could prevent his victims from recovering money in civil lawsuits. I will freely admit that while I took trust and estates in law school, it was never my area of expertise. I have my own trust and estates lawyer for purposes of my kids and life insurance and all that sort of stuff. But I will tell you all that that it is hard, generally. This is a very vague way of putting this, but this is what I'm going to tell you about it. It is hard to breach the walls of a trust. There are ways to do it in litigation. It's not impossible. It's not something that has never been done, but it is something that will add an extra layer of difficulty and challenge to the civil lawsuits that have been filed against Jeffrey Epstein's estate by his victims in the last few days. And there are several, by the way. We haven't talked about this a lot on the broadcast, but there are several ongoing and new civil lawsuits against Jeffrey Epstein or his estate. It's yet again a sign of how far narcissists will go, even from beyond the grave, to prevent themselves from being held liable for their harmful conduct. And it's something that, as these cases proceed, we will all have to pay attention to, because, there will be the stage of liability in the civil cases that have now been brought, meaning, like, is Jeffrey Epstein liable, or his estate rather, liable to these women who were molested by him as children, and anyone who was trafficked by him, obviously. And then there will be a secondary set of litigation now, after presumably he is found liable, where those people will have to pursue recovery against the trust. And so it is an absolute additional layer of difficulty here. So one thing here, because I just saw a question scroll by on the feed, and I'm just going to respond to this very briefly in real time. Trusts are not voided if you suicide. Life insurance policies may contain clauses that say you can't recover life insurance if you suicide. A trust is a very different thing. So think of a trust as kind of a separate legal container. Okay, so let's say hypothetically you have life insurance, you die in a plane crash, your estate recovers that life insurance. Let's just say hypothetically you have, $500,000 in life insurance. Your estate recovers that. You can set up a mechanism before you die that routes all of your assets, or your life insurance for that matter, into a trust. And one of the advantages of a trust is that, one, it can keep your heirs from having to pay estate taxes until they actually remove those assets from the trust. And the other thing that it can do is it can provide a mechanism for the trust, for instance, to provide for your heirs over time if they are underage or the like. Okay, so a trust is not automatically voided if you suicide. That's not how it works. Trusts are totally separate legal mechanisms. Some life insurance policies may have clauses, however, that void whether or not you can recover life insurance if you suicide. So, it is a complicated legal structure. I will just say that trusts are used routinely by the wealthy to prevent their heirs from having to pay taxes on their estates. And in this mechanism, in this situation, it does appear, now again, this is speculation because we don't have Jeffrey Epstein speaking from beyond the grave about why he did this, but it appears that he set up this trust for the purpose of preventing, or at least making it more difficult for those who he victimized to get money from his estate. For those of you who are wondering about class actions here, so I will just remind all of you, we haven't talked about this on the broadcast for a while now, but I think most of you know that I spent the first 7 years that I was a lawyer doing class action litigation. Certifying a case as a class action requires some very specific things under the Federal Rules of Civil Procedure. One of those things is that you have to show that you and everyone else in the class were damaged in the same way. So the reason why class actions work, for instance, in cases like, let's just say hypothetically, cases of cancer arising from Roundup. Actually, that's not a good example because that's mass tort. Let's take a better example. You're the victim of a securities pump and dump scheme. These are the kind of cases that I used to do, right? Some of you may remember that movie Boiler Room. I think it was from the early 90s. You are someone who gets a phone call from somebody in a boiler room who says, I've got this great stock opportunity and you need to buy into it now. They jack the price up, stock gets dumped, everybody's investments get lost. That is an example of a case where everybody is injured in the same way by the same scheme. And the only thing that is different about the individuals who are victimized in that case is the amount. And there are structures within class action settlements and class action damages allocations where very complex, and in some ways, once you know how to do this, very simple, calculations are made to determine the amount of recovery that someone would get out of a class action settlement fund. The situation with Jeffrey Epstein is different. And while I don't want to preclude the idea that a class action might function here in some way, the challenge is this. Some of his victims claim that they were raped by him. Some of his victims claim that they were trafficked by him. Some of his victims claim that they were molested once. Some of his victims claim that they were molested over a series of years. Some of those victims claim that there was certain sexual conduct involved. Some of those victims claim that there were other kinds of sexual conduct involved. Some of those victims claim that they were paid. Some of those victims claim that they were not. There are, within the scope of what this class would be, an incredible differing number of values, potentially, that could be assigned to how the victims were damaged. Now, there are ways of dealing with this. I should also add, within the class action mechanisms of the Federal Rules of Civil Procedure, you can have what are called subclasses. Okay, so let's say hypothetically, you have people who were victimized, through sex trafficking. That might actually be one totally separate class action. You might have people who were victimized by sexual assault. You might have people who are in both. Okay, how the class is defined determines whether or not the class can recover. But let me just say this. For purposes of tapping a trust, you're not going to do that in a class mechanism. That's something where individuals who seek recovery, if they have to seek recovery on the basis of damage first, that's the class action mechanism. And then if that class recovers, then there might be an option to tap the trust through civil litigation. But you're not just going to get a bunch of people together who may have hypothetically been, and I do not mean this pejoratively. What I mean is that there are elements of proof who may hypothetically have been damaged by Jeffrey Epstein. Everybody gets to tap the trust at once. That's not likely how it's going to work here. There's going to have to be specific standards that are met in order for the trust to be broken. So it's very complicated. And I will just, my reason for mentioning it is this. When I saw this news come across my phone yesterday and this morning, it raised some very serious flags for me about the intent behind the formation of the trust, the fact that it was completed 2 days before he suicided, that his will was rewritten 2 days before he died, which plainly shows that he had an intent to modify it for particular reasons before he killed himself, and the significance of the difficulty that it raises now for people who have been victimized by him. So it's a challenge, and it's not a good one. And it should yet again be a reminder of the lengths to which narcissists will go to prevent themselves from being held liable. That doesn't mean a lot of people aren't going to try. I will just say that it's very sad to me. It's just incredibly, incredibly sad to me that these women who were victimized as children are now going to have one extra, not at all insignificant legal hoop to jump through in order to recover something for the damage that was done to them. Okay, so that brings us to a couple of questions related to our other favorite narcissist, the president. So we had a couple of questions today about the following. Joyce Vance on MSNBC a couple of days ago made some statements about the invocation of the 25th Amendment, and they raise really interesting legal issues about how the 25th Amendment can and can't be invoked. One of the things that is, and we've talked about this on the broadcast a lot, about the fact that there are so many acting cabinet members right now. People who have not been confirmed, right? We went for like 180 days without a confirmed Secretary of Defense, for instance. That's like more than 6 months, right? We've had circumstances where we've had acting attorneys general, acting interior secretaries, acting labor secretaries. I mean, it's like the layers of people who have not gone through the official process of being confirmed by the Senate is significant. One of the things that means is that there is a question, and again, those of you who watched yesterday know that I went through this whole thing about like the fact that the 25th Amendment has never been invoked in this country. Nobody really knows exactly how it would work. But one of the questions that was raised by Joyce Vance very legitimately was, can an acting cabinet secretary be a part of the numbers that are needed under the 25th Amendment to try to remove a president? And again, this is one of those things where I think nobody really knows the answer to that question. It's a really good flag to raise. And I want to comment on it just from the standpoint of responding to the question that was asked, which is, do I agree with the fact that it's a problem? Yes, I absolutely agree with the fact that it's a problem. And I will also just add, as I said yesterday, and it's worth repeating again, I think there are significant concerns at this moment in time about whether or not the 25th Amendment will ever be invoked with regard to this president. I don't see it as a potential possibility at this point for the removal of this president, however much it should be invoked. From a political standpoint, a strategic standpoint, I don't really see how it gets done. And that in and of itself is a real serious concern. We have someone who is patently unwell leading the country right now. And yet, because of his enablers and his sycophants and his complicit GOP supporters, a great unlikelihood that the 25th Amendment will be invoked, let alone that it could be invoked successfully. So I think we all have to kind of like, again, you all know, I said it yesterday, I'm going to say it again. I never say never, but I will tell you that I think we all have to step away from the 25th Amendment as some great hope that it's going to result in the removal of the president. All right. Another question about the president yesterday was with regard to the polls. So there have been some significant polls in the last couple of weeks showing that the president is down, in some cases by significant double digits in swing states heading into 2020. There have also been some pollsters recently who have come forward, including people who made great predictions about the 2018 election that turned out to be correct, stating that, the president could lose the 2020 election by epic numbers in the Electoral College. So I'm just going to say this. I think that we should all ignore the polls. And even though they bode very well right now, there are two competing factors that we all have to consider heading into 2020. One is that the 2016 election, the night before the election took place, predicted that there was like an 89% chance that Hillary Clinton was going to be the president of the United States. The second thing that we have to consider is that really good poll numbers for our side of the fence have a tendency to depress organizing and to depress voter turnout. My biggest concern going into 2020, frankly, and again, this is something that we've talked about, repeatedly on this broadcast and that I've talked about repeatedly on social media, is this. We have to be worried about the election being interfered with. We have to worry very much about voter turnout and complacency, or for that matter, disengagement, because people are so overwhelmed. Like, the only option going into 2020 at this moment in time is to organize like your life depends on it and the lives of everyone that you care about depend on it. Because frankly, it does. Like, I don't want to be melodramatic about it, but people are dying under the policies of this administration on a daily basis right now. The politics of what's happening in this country. I mean, we had like 3 white supremacist young men arrested in the last 48 hours for plotting mass shooting sprees at the inspiration of the president. Like, we can't allow good polls to prevent us from acting as if we are losing and every vote matters, because frankly, any other approach is profoundly dangerous. So that's really all I want to say about that. Sure, they look good. Does that mean that the Russians aren't going to interfere with our election security again? No. Does it mean that we don't need every single one of the 100 million eligible voters who didn't vote in 2016 to be registered and show up at the polls next November? No. It means we need all of that. It means we need to be organizing right now to get it done. And so the one word of caution that I just want to say about this is that if you choose to share polling data online, please put a caveat in what you share that we cannot become complacent, that getting out the vote is incredibly important, that voter rights actions are incredibly important, that voter turnout is incredibly important, and that none of this can stop until we win, because hopefully we will. But we literally can't rest until it's over, all right? One of you asked a question about data and research with regard to the economy. So let me just say this. I think you all know that I kind of like rabidly consume media, news, and commentary and analysis. And I have things that I read every day that, are put into the filter of my brain and that often end up on this broadcast. Okay. What I will say about the question that was asked, which was basically like, I'm trying to find evidence that the current economic trajectory is the result of Obama's economic policies so that I can debate with Trump followers whether or not Trump is responsible for this economy. So I'm just going to say this. There is plenty, like volumes of commentary out there from economists who are incredibly profoundly respected about the nature of Obama's economic policy and how it is responsible for the after effect since Trump was inaugurated, okay? It's not hard to find this stuff. You can go look it up on Google. But let me just say this. You are wasting your time if you are going online to try to convince a Trump supporter that the economic trajectory since the inauguration is Trump's responsibility or that he should be praised for it, okay? I mean, I think anybody who knows anything about the nature of national economic policy understands that it takes a while to ramp it up. When things have been, when we've been in a recession, the Obama administration for the first 2 years that he was in office is a great example of this. The 2007 recession was real. The after effects of it continued, by the way, all the way through to about 2011. The policies that he put into place starting in 2008 took several years to actually demonstrate an impact and to continue the upswing of that, okay? But this is the point. And again, this is something that I really just want to like sink home to all of you, because I know there are some of you who are still having debates within your family, within your circles of friends, within your communities about this. The people who are still supporting Trump at this moment in time are lost. They're lost. And I don't like to ever say that about any human being, but I mean, seriously, if you can continue to support this president when he has put children in detention camps, when he has ripped 4-month-old babies off the nursing breasts of their mothers in Mississippi as recently as 10 days ago, those are not people who you're going to convince to change their mind, let alone with economic data. And I feel like we have so much energy that is so much better put into other realms right now. that it is important, like incredibly important, to decide how you are going to expend your energy. All right. That brings me to a final topic today that I just want to mention. A couple of you noticed that I was tweeting a few things out last night and this morning about the issue of cyberbullying, which actually I think is cyberbullying sounds to me like such a nice term for some of the cultural things that we're seeing right now on Facebook and on Twitter. The term that I keep using over and over is dragging. And some of you have, or cancel culture is another term that's sort of term of art that's used for this. For those of you who don't know what this means, dragging is where you basically somebody makes a critique of somebody else, a gang mentality takes over, and that person's name or reputation is just like utterly dragged through the mud. I was made aware last night of a private Facebook group where several women who have been expressing concerns, particularly about people who are like abandoning Trump now, and what do we do with these people who have walked away, and should they be publicly shamed, should they not? Where several women were just flat out abused. I was able to have a look at some of this, and it's really upsetting for having a difference of opinion, frankly, about how people should be treated. And I know that things are very heightened right now, right? I know that a lot of us are in fight or flight response all the time. I will just say that this is one of several instances that I have been made aware of in like the last 4 days where really serious damage has been done to individuals, like traumatic, awful things, because of differing opinions. I learned this morning that someone who I follow on social media landed in the hospital with a severe panic attack that she thought actually was like a myocardial infarction. She thought she was having a heart attack, when in fact what was happening was that she had been bullied within a group on social media to the point where she had a severe panic attack, and like literally had to be put on medication and oxygen in a hospital because of what it had done to her emotionally. So this morning I posted a speech that Monica Lewinsky gave in Cannes. I want to say it's about 4 years ago now. It tags along with the speech that she did at TED in 2015 as well, on the issue of the way social media mobs are formed and the damage that they do. I am at the moment particularly concerned about the damage that women are doing to other women on our side of the fence. And that relates specifically to the fact that we can have differences of opinion, right? We can disagree about the best political or strategic approach to something. We're also allowed to be imperfect humans. We're allowed to make mistakes, right? We're allowed to learn as we grow through things that are difficult, and to decide to become better humans as a result of that. The thing that I just want to lean into here is that I have seen some of the people who follow this broadcast, including here on Patreon, participating in some of this behavior. And I know that when we are hurt and we are wounded and we are feeling disempowered, that there is a cultural and psychological phenomenon of stepping on other people to make ourselves feel better. This, by the way, is one of the things that has been documented about Trump's followers. Okay, so we have to be very, very, very mindful of the damage that we can do to one another by ganging up on people on social media, and particularly the damage that it does to our ability to organize, our ability to work together, our ability to make a difference, our ability to move forward. One of the things that Monica Lewinsky has been very vocal about is the idea of compassion and the idea of empathy, right? That everybody's on their own trajectory, and that while there is obviously, doxing people online and publishing their addresses and allowing for white supremacist harassment is something that we should all condemn, absolutely. Differences of opinion, stories that are reported online where you're not a personal witness to what has happened, interactions that are, people make up stories all the time about why somebody's doing something online, right? And that becomes a basis for dragging people. I just really want to say to everybody on here, please think twice before you engage in that behavior. Because the things that I have seen inside, particularly this group that I was able to kind of have a look at inside last night, are just really upsetting. And it's stuff that is designed to hurt people. It's stuff that's designed to do damage. And, there is so much harm being perpetrated right now under this administration, so much violence. I just want to put a plea out there that we do not do that to one another on this side of the fence. And that before we engage in a kind of like mob mentality dragging of other women on social media, that we stop and pause and consider what it would be like to stand in that person's shoes. Because physical harm is being done to people by what is happening online. And, all it takes is a photograph, because I saw this, a photograph of someone on social media, literally in a hospital bed because of being dragged on social media, to make you think twice about the impact of your comments and your rage and your hate being directed at other people on our side of the fence. So we have to really be mindful about this right now. And, one of the things that I'm thinking about, just, even within my own life, is how can we act from kindness first? That doesn't mean kindness toward people who are racist. It doesn't mean kindness toward white supremacists. It means kindness to people on our side of the fence who are on a growth trajectory, okay? Who maybe aren't quite where we are in terms of our political evolution. How can we be kind? And how can we operate from a place of compassion and empathy first? How can we imagine what it would be like to be standing in that person's shoes before we respond to them with the mob on social media, let alone because of the outcome? And I will just remind you all, the amazing thing about Monica Lewinsky's TED Talk, which I went back and listened to this morning as well, is that she talks about the damage in real life to herself, to her family, to other people who have experienced this, the damage that has been done to women, to people of color, to members of the LGBTQ community as a result of this kind of behavior. And in some cases, it has resulted in people killing themselves. So it's just so profoundly important right now that while we hold people accountable for behavior that maybe isn't up to par, okay, and that we do it, and this, I want to say this really clearly. Holding people accountable is not holding people accountable for things that you yourself don't know about. Holding people accountable is about holding them accountable for things that that you've seen yourself. I do this all the time, by the way. I had conversations over the weekend with several of my white female friends where I was like, we need to have a conversation about your consciousness right now, about your experience of race. And we can have those private conversations, for instance, in ways that hold people accountable without ruining people's reputations, without dragging them through the mud, without causing them harm, without publicly humiliating them. We can differentiate accountability from dragging. We can also, by the way, have conversations with people who maybe don't understand all the things that we might understand about the political scene or about wokeness in ways that are compassionate. So, again, I would encourage you all to go have a look at, the Monica Lewinsky speech from Cannes that I posted. Go look at her TED Talk. Think very seriously about your own engagement on social media right now. I myself, by the way, sat down this morning and made a whole list of things that that from where I sit are going to be kind of like new rules of engagement, because I'm just not willing to participate in that kind of culture anymore. Having seen the things that I've seen in the last few days, it's one of the most detrimental and damaging aspects of what we're all doing right now. And it's just not healthy. And it's actually, by the way, counterproductive to our own organizing and our own resistance. So that's where I want to leave it for today. Reminder to all of you, scholarship application period for Haven closes tomorrow at 7 p.m. Pacific. Head on over to GaiaLeadershipProject.com/Haven if you want to apply or if you want to donate a scholarship. As I mentioned at the top of the broadcast, we've got more than 40 people registered already for the program. We're super psyched about this. Registration for the program itself will close a week from Friday. So get in while you can, all right? GaiaLeadershipProject.com/Haven. Much love to all of you. Much generosity and kindness to all of you. Stay centered on your own growth trajectory today. And I will talk to all of you tomorrow. All right, bye.